Good afternoon. I am Delia Valles from New Mexico State University, and I am with the NSF HSI STEM Hub. I co-host this webinar series with Dr. Marta Desmond. This is also a hub support team consisting of Dr. Margie Vela, our program manager, and Ms. Miriam Favela, our program specialist, working to make this webinar a success. I would like to welcome you to the first webinar of our spring webinar series, targeting grant writing. And today's webinar is titled National Science Foundation Opportunities with the STEM and the 2-year college program. This webinar will last 1 hour. Today's webinar has 2 speakers, and we anticipate 15 to 20 minutes for questions at the end of the presentations. All questions related to today's topic must be submitted in writing via the question and answer box. Our team will be monitoring and curating your questions for the Q&A session. We might not have enough time to answer all of the questions. However, we will address what we can in the time allotted. Our team will also address technical questions related to the use of Zoom and other technical issues. Please submit these questions in writing via the chat box. We have an individual dedicated to monitor the technical questions. This webinar will be recorded, and all webinar recordings are posted on the HSI STEM website. By registering for this webinar, you are also added to the HSI STEM Hub mail contact list. Or email contact list. You will receive an email with links to many of the resources available in our training library, as well as information about upcoming virtual events. All materials and recordings are available to members of the HSI STEM Professional Network. Please join the network for the most up-to-date HSI STEM Hub information. There is no membership fee, and you can join this, and there's a website that will be posted in a little bit on the chat box. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. As you leave the webinar, please fill out an evaluation survey. We really need your feedback and data to be reported to NSF to measure our program outcomes. The link to this survey is posted in the chat room, and it will take no more than 5 minutes to complete this survey. Please, we really need you to do that. Well, today it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our speakers this afternoon, and it will be Mr. Michael Davis, and he is actually been participating with us. This will be the second time that he does one of the webinars. He has served in community colleges for the past 20 years. Mike has been a rotating program officer in the Division of Undergraduate Education, DUE, in the National Science Foundation, Education and Human Resources Directorate. He started his career at the City College of Chicago, a district of 7 independently accredited community colleges. For 15 years, he moved through roles as a faculty member, department chair, and administrator, including Associate Vice President Chancellor for STEM and Interim Vice President for Academic Affairs. During his time as an administrator, he worked to strengthen the district's relationship with the Chicago Public Schools through greatly expanded early college programs, including the establishment of 5-year early college STEM schools. Our second speaker is Dr. Michael Ferrara, and he is a permanent program director in the Division of the Undergraduate Education at the National Science Foundation. He earned his PhD in mathematics from Emory University in 2005, and prior to coming to NSF, he was most recently a professor in the Department of Mathematics and Statistical Science at the University of Colorado, Denver from 2009 to 2020. Dr. Ferrara maintains active research programs in extremal combinatorics and undergraduate STEM education. He currently serves as co-lead on the NSF STEM and HSI programs, in addition to his work with the IU's and the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. So we are looking forward to your presentations, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. So please go ahead and share your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. So hopefully you are all seeing our title slide, Advancing Innovation and Impact at Undergraduate STEM Education, 2-year Institutions of Higher Education at STEM, Scholarships in STEM. So as you mentioned, I am Mike Davis. I'm a rotating program officer here, and I'm currently on loan from a community college in the Tarpon Springs area of Florida, St. Petersburg College. And the first announcement that I have here to make is one that I think is particularly important for members, for people who are here today, and that is that there has been a change in our solicitation for the HSI program. So up until just after the new year, the HSI program had the solicitation 20-599. That has been updated to 22-545. And the big change that comes with that is that we will be accepting proposals for track 1, track 2, and track 3 this spring. Now that is a change from what we were accepting under the previous solicitation. So if you were preparing a track 3 proposal that was going to be due on February 9th, 2022, you can still submit that proposal. The deadline has now been moved back to March 28th, so you have more time to work on it. And if you are considering a proposal submission for tracks 1 or 2, you do not have to wait until August. You can actually start submitting them for March. So we are building up our capacity building regime here. In August, we'll be accepting tracks 1 and 3. And then next year, in the winter time, we'll be accepting tracks 1 and 2, and then that pattern will repeat annually thereafter. So we'll be accepting tracks 1 and 3 in August and tracks 1 and 2. So I represent, along with Mike Ferrara, we represent the Division of Undergraduate Education, where we invest in efforts that are aimed at strengthening STEM education at 2- and 4-year colleges, and to improve curricula instruction, laboratory infrastructure assessment, diversity of students, faculty, and all kinds of collaborations. So we have a number of programs that contribute to these goals. You're going to be hearing about 2 of them today, the STEM and what we call the 2-year college program description. Now, if this is something that you do not have a lot of experience in yet, don't worry. We have a lot of resources that are there to help you. The PA-PPG is one that is very useful for both first-time and veteran grant writers. So part 1, chapter 2 has a proposal preparation guide, all the things that need to go into any kind of proposal that you're going to submit to the National Science Foundation. And the exhibits, which come towards the back of that document, contain a proposal preparation checklist. So it is very useful for putting forward the ideas that you have and making sure that they are in the structure that you want to present them to the National Science Foundation so they can be reviewed. And when these are reviewed, we have 2 main merit review criteria that everything gets looked at through these lenses. And one is the intellectual merit. And that encompasses the ability to create new knowledge and advance knowledge. The other is broader impacts, and that's the ability or the potential to benefit society and contribute to the achievement of specific desired societal outcomes. So what we are looking for are proposals that we can review based on these 2 pieces of merit review criteria. This is also described in our PA-PPG, and you'll also see it called out in every single solicitation that the National Science Foundation has. So I'm going to pause here for some key points before Michael Ferrara jumps in to start discussing the STEM program. And I believe some of the people from the HSI STEM Resource Hub wanted to talk about some key points.
Thank you so much for that great update. So the key points we're taking away from this part of the presentation today is that there are changes to the NSF HSI program solicitation, and that is now NSF 22-545. It has new deadlines, some giving us more time, some giving us an opportunity to submit earlier. And then review the PAPPG. That's kind of like the proposal Bible, right? So let's review the PAPPG, especially part 1, chapter 2, and exhibit 11-1, I believe. So, or 2-1, something like that. Sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. Thank you so much for that. And so we'll go ahead and go forward with Dr. Ferrara.
Dr. Ferrara.
Thanks a lot. Mike, you're controlling the slide, so I'm just going to say slide to advance, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Great. So yes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the STEM program. Again, I'm Mike Ferrara. I'm a permanent program officer here at the NSF. I'm one of the co-leads of the STEM program. We have a deadline coming up at the end of February, but we have deadlines every year. The STEM program, as I'll discuss, is very broad and covers almost every type of STEM degree, every type of student you can think of that's at your institution. And so I just want to give you sort of a big picture of what we're looking for, what the projects are generally about, and then I'm happy to answer questions, as they said at the end. So slide. So as I said, I'm part of the STEM leadership team. You can contact any of us. I don't know why Tom's name is not a link. I apologize, but it's Alex Medina Borgia is our lead. And then Mindy Capaldi and Tom Kim are the other 2 co-leads, same as myself. Slide. So the STEM program has a number of goals. It is first and foremost a scholarship program. So our first goal is to provide scholarships to domestic, low-income, academically talented students with demonstrated financial need who are pursuing a degree in one of the STEM eligible disciplines. And as I go through these slides about STEM, I'll explain what we mean by all of those different terms. STEM projects also look to adapt and implement evidence-based curricular and co-curricular activities to support our scholars, increase retention, success, and graduation of these low-income STEM students, test strategies for systematically supporting student academic and career pathways in STEM in ways that align with your institutions. And then we also would like our projects to disseminate their findings related to the supports and institutions to the supports and everything that are undertaken by the project. So slide. So expected scholar outcomes. It's anticipated that STEM scholars will achieve one of the following by the end of the scholarship award period. The first is to obtain an associate's, baccalaureate, or graduate degree in an STEM eligible discipline and enter the workforce or go on to a graduate program. And the other possible outcomes are to transfer from an associate's to a bachelor's program or to advance from an undergraduate to a graduate program. Slide. So STEM projects have all different types of activities, and I'll just sort of give you a broad picture of some of the types of things that they do, and then we'll talk in a little bit about some of the types of activities that are required from the projects as they come in. So the support activities have to promote student success, retention, transfer or graduation in STEM, and/or entry into the STEM workforce or graduate studies. We want findings from the projects to make local improvements for academic or student supports, or also to provide an understanding of student success. You know, how does the different things that your project is doing impacting student outcomes? And it may also, as you disseminate to the broader community, inform other proposals that come in to the program. Slide. So, you know, great STEM projects really look at and tell the story of their institutions, and each institution is different. We fund everything from small 4-year institutions, small or large 2-year institutions, very large comprehensive universities, everything in between. And so flexibility is really important. This is also because low-income students, they just have a lot of different circumstances, and a lot of different things are part of their lives as they work towards graduating. So, you know, I really want to encourage you to be as flexible as possible. And I'm not sure if the slides are auto advancing. I don't, hopefully there's not a timer set up. But.
Yeah, I'm not doing anything, but they seem to be advancing.
Okay, well, I'll go faster. All right, so let's go ahead, Mike, then let's go ahead and move forward. And if it bounces forward, let's just pop it on back. So the first, as a reminder, STEM, high talent, low income students with demonstrated financial need. Academic talent is intentionally broad. It's determined by you when you write your proposal and send it to us. It can have a GPA target. It can involve letters of recommendation. There can be other factors. But one of the most important things is that, as I said, low-income students, they often don't have the time or the resources that students that have more means may have. And that may mean that they don't have as much access to opportunities. So we really, really encourage you to think broadly about what it means to identify talent. You're encouraged to develop holistic selection criteria that look at all the different things that might tell you that a student is talented, however you determine that that means. You are permitted to target your recruiting to different populations of students. However, at the end of the day, if a student who is talented, low income, and has need applies for the program, they have to receive fair and equal consideration to receive a scholarship. That means that while you may look to recruit women or students of specific commuters, any different groups that you can think of, all talented low-income students with need have to receive equal consideration. Obviously, they may not all be selected, but they have to be considered. Slide. The second prong is low income status. The definition of low income is, again, also determined by your institution when you write the proposal. You need to partner with your financial aid office, and it should apply not only to the STEM project, but to any other federally funded project that serves low income students. We see a lot of different definitions from our institutions. Certainly, federal Pell Grants eligibility is a very common one, but we also see eligibility for TRIO programs. We see 175%, I'm making up that percent, of the poverty level in your region. Whatever your institution decides is an appropriate definition for low income should be presented, and that's what you'll use to identify your scholars. If you send us a proposal, you have to formally partner with financial aid, so you are allowed to submit a letter from them saying that the Office of Financial Aid understands the STEM guidelines and is able to confirm the institutional definition of low income, and that they're going to do everything that they need to do to work with you to make sure that the scholarships are administered according to the rules. Slide. Our third prong is unmet financial need. This often for undergraduates is going to involve FAFSA. So your institution will have a cost of attendance that usually includes tuition and fees, probably includes housing costs, either on or off campus, and may include a number of other things. Again, your financial aid office will know how your institution calculates the cost of attendance. Students, undergraduates at least, then will fill out the FAFSA, and typically unmet need is going to be the cost of attendance minus the estimated family and student contribution, and then also taking away any other grants or scholarships that the student is entitled to. They should receive those scholarships first, and then our hope is that STEM will top them up so that they don't have any unmet need. So one of the things about the STEM program is that this is a congressionally mandated program. And so the maximum amount across all the tracks is $10,000 per year per scholar for a maximum of 4 years. That is set by Congress. Slide. We want to know that who your scholars are and that they're there. So if you send us a proposal, you need to give us a table that says, okay, here are the degrees that we're looking to serve that we want to give scholarships to. And here are the number of students, or at least an estimate, a model of the number of students that would meet the criteria to receive the scholarships. So we want you to lay that out and tell us, okay, we have students there. The number of scholars per institution may differ. Some institutions give slightly smaller awards because their students have less need. Depending on the size of the award and the track you're in will often determine the size of your scholar pool. I'll talk a little bit about the tracks in a moment. So what is the STEM program looking for? You can go ahead and slide, Mike, that's fine. So we want you to use data and tell us what you know about your students, about your institution, so that you can serve the low-income students that are there. We really think it's important that you find internal and external partners for your project. That means obviously all the different academic departments that your scholars might come from, but get to know, if you don't already know them, get to know your financial aid folks, get to know your student affairs folks, your transfer office if you're serving transfer students. Strong proposals that end up being funded demonstrate that really the whole team is on board from the institution. And again, proposals that build on institutional strengths and needs, and specifically, if you have them, institutional scans or other needs assessments are generally received quite favorably. I like to say that a good STEM proposal, and this is true of a lot of different programs. This is true also of the HSI program, the IU's program, the 2-year PD. Tell us the story of your school, of your students. What is it that you're trying to do? Who is it that you're trying to serve? What's the problem that you're trying to solve, and what do you know about it? The more you tell that story and really lay it all out, reviewers and NSF staff will connect better with what you're trying to do, which increases the chances of you being ultimately funded. Slide. Okay, STEM eligible degrees and disciplines. Now, this is a big change. For those of you who are familiar with the STEM program from previous, we have made a big change for our new solicitation. Projects supporting scholars studying in any disciplinary field where the NSF provides research funding are eligible for the STEM program. Right? That means we've expanded to include the social, behavioral, and economic sciences is the most notable inclusion, but we're much broader. There are a few exceptions. We do not fund any biomedical or clinical degrees. That is generally the purview of the NIH. We do not fund degrees in business administration at any level. And we do not fund students who are currently pursuing K-12 teacher licensure, regardless of what degree they're pursuing. If you're looking to support K-12 students, future K-12 teachers, we recommend that you look at the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. I'm also a program officer there. So if you're looking to support your future teachers, please feel free to ask me questions about that, and I can talk about the differences. Pretty much any degree outside of the bachelor's in business administration degrees or MBAs are eligible for STEM. So associates, bachelor's, master's, doctoral, and we have wonderful projects at all of those different levels. If you're unsure about whether your degree is eligible, and again, it's much broader now than it was even last year, please feel free to write me, any of the STEM program officers, and we'll get that cleared up for you very quickly. Slide. Another new part is that STEM is at its heart a workforce development program. We want to know that low-income students are gonna get their degrees and be able to get out there and find jobs. So there's a few things that we've added. All proposers need to demonstrate that the degrees being pursued by students or that within their proposals fall within a disciplinary area of strategic need for either the economic competitiveness or national security of the country. In addition, proposers must show that upon graduation, scholars will have positive job prospects, either in their region or nationally, even if most of the students will first go on to graduate school before they transition into the workforce. The analysis of scholar job prospects should be submitted as a supplemental document, and how you demonstrate need and scholar job prospects is up to you. But if you look at the program solicitation, we've given at least some potential places where there's some data or other things that you can use to help make those arguments. Of course, depending on your disciplines, you may do something quite different. So I just want to talk quickly, slide, about the STEM program tracks. We have 4 tracks, each that are of different sizes and look to accomplish different things. Slide. So first, another change is that an institution may submit up to 2 proposals across tracks 1, 2, and 3, either as a single institution or a sub-awardee or as a member of an interinstitutional consortium. It used to be that you were permitted to submit 1 proposal for each college or school at your institution, but that disadvantaged institutions that didn't have a college and school structure. And it was very difficult to track how that actually worked when things were cross-cutting. So now any institution, regardless of size and structure, can submit up to 2 proposals per cycle. So institutions with current awards should also wait until the end of the third year of those awards if their new proposal would overlap in the degrees that they're giving scholarships to with their old award. And if you're unsure, again, please reach out. Slide. Some common requirements. Like pretty much every NSF program, we need you to build your proposals after the literature. There's a wonderful set of literature out there about how to support low-income students, specifically in STEM and more broadly. All STEM projects need to have two things, regardless of their other foci or other parts. We expect scholars to be placed into cohorts so that they can find a community of folks like them to help them make progress through their degree programs. And all scholars must be paired with a faculty mentor. It can be a one-on-one mentoring structure or a group mentoring structure. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but cohorts and faculty mentoring are critical and required. Okay. Every track 1, 2, and 3 proposal should also describe an evaluation plan, and the evaluator should be external to the project, even if they're not necessarily external to the institution. Slide. So our first track is institutional capacity building. These awards are up to 6 years and up to $750,000. 60% of the total budget is devoted to scholarships. So I think there was a question about how many scholars. Well, at a maximum of $10,000 per year, and you are now the 60% of the budget going at least towards scholarships, gives you at least some idea of how many scholars that at a minimum you would be supporting. Of course, how many years you support them can change that number. Track 1 is specifically for institutions that have never received STEM or STEP funding. Okay, we encourage you to use the NSF award search or to talk to your sponsored research offices if you're not sure if you received funding from those programs. The PI needs to be a STEM faculty member currently teaching in one of the STEM eligible disciplines, or a STEM administrator who has taught in one of those disciplines within the past 2 years. If not serving as the PI, a STEM administrator should be a part of the project leadership. They don't have to be a PI or co-PI, but they have to be a clear part of the leadership team if they're not in one of those roles. And you have to look at all the different departments that you want to give scholarships to, and you need to have faculty members from each department represented on the project team somehow, co-PIs, senior personnel, or mentors. We want folks that are able to speak to the specific requirements, challenges, strengths, needs of students in each degree path. Slide. Track 2 is similar to track 1. It's a little bit larger. It's also up to 6 years, up to $1.5 million. Again, 60% of the budget devoted to scholarships. This is now single institutions of higher education. Now, it is perfectly fine if you have never received STEM or STEP funding to apply for track 2. But if you have and you want to have a single institution project, track 2 is where you need to be. Same restrictions on principal investigators, involvement of a STEM administrator, and the involvement of faculty from all the disciplines that are being scholarshiped in the project. Slide. So track 1 and 2 are scholarship intensive proposals, projects. So several years ago, there was a research requirement for tracks 1 and 2, but that is no longer the case. Formal research activities are not required. The goal is to support the degree completion of the scholars and to get them out into graduate school, into the workforce. Proposals can utilize non-scholarship funds, so that 40%, for a lot of different types of things, to provide additional research opportunities, internships, travel to conferences. That's also the part of the budget where you support your staff, your evaluator, things like that. Now, while there's no formal research requirement, we do still expect track 1 and 2 proposals to support knowledge generation. Your evaluation, evaluation is how you're looking at whether or not your project is moving towards its goals. You're collecting data, doing maybe interviews or focus groups or surveys with your scholars to make sure everything's working well for them. That's a great thing to share with the community about why all the cool things you're doing are working and why they might want to do them too. And we also, again, as I mentioned this a little bit before, we want all projects, tracks 1, 2, and 3, to have substantive dissemination plans. Again, one of the things that's really important, I talked about different ways you can define low income. Almost any reasonable definition of low income captures at least, if not more than, half of the students in this country. And one of the really important things is that even if they can't all be scholars, there's a lot of us out there trying to support those students. And so we believe that STEM projects are really great ways to generate knowledge and strategies and plans that, even aside from scholarships, can help those students, get through their education and move on out into the world. Slide. So track 3 are our interinstitutional consortia. They're our largest awards. They're also up to 6 years, but they're up to $5 million. These are multi-institution collaborations that focus on a common interest or problem. So these are meant to be mutually beneficial collaborations across all institutions, and there should be equivalent, not necessarily equal, but equivalent benefit to all institutions. As an example of something that we don't like to see, we will sometimes see institutions put in a track 3 proposal with community college partners, but it's not clear that the community college partners have a real voice, that they're helping to lead the project, bring the appropriate context to understand how those scholars will thrive in those institutions as they then move forward and transfer. There's a lot of different things, but we really want those collaborations to be strong. PIs of track 3 proposals can either be a faculty member or a STEM administrator. Notice that there's no restriction on how recently they've taught in the discipline, or a researcher whose expertise is in institutional, educational, or social science research in higher ed. Slide. All track 3 projects are required to engage in high quality research. So this knowledge generation, while also it may come from evaluation to some extent, there should be a detailed research plan about how to adapt, implement, scale up effective evidence-based programs. There we go. And I just want to make it very clear, because we get this question a lot. We have no preference for types of theoretical frameworks, methodologies. I've had people say to me, well, the NSF only likes quantitative research, or you only like, I've also had people say they only like qualitative research. Develop your research program, come up with the data streams and methods that work best to answer the questions you're asking. We are not secretly looking for any particular thing. We want them to be theory driven. We want the research plans to be solid. You design them in the way that you see is best. Slide. We also have collaborative planning grants, very quickly, that are up to 1 year and up to $100,000. Again, those track 3 proposals are very large and very complex, and we want to give members of the community an opportunity to plan. So the collaborative planning grants are groups of 2 or more institutions and any other potential partners to build those collaborations, try to understand, collect data, look at the complex issues that might be in play and might be the focus of a track 3. Pilot some supports that might be part of your project, or do the work with your administrators, your legal departments, to develop the interinstitutional agreements you need, articulation agreements, other types of agreements that'll make those collaborations really strong, with the idea being that once that work is done, you'll proceed to put in what we hope will be a wonderful track 3 proposal. Slide. The project PI needs to be a faculty member teaching in any STEM eligible discipline, or a STEM administrator but it needs to be at one of the institutions in the consortium. Now, these are smaller awards. The project description is short, no more than 6 pages. There is a list of items that we'd like you to cover. I don't think too heavy of a lift, but there are things we'd like you to speak to in those 6 pages. It's a little bit different than writing a sort of a traditional 15-page proposal. There's no requirement for dissemination or evaluation for collaborative planning grants. Slide. Okay, so I think we might do some key takeaways before Mike is going to jump in and talk about the program description. And I understand that I covered a lot of ground, so the key takeaways may be, I don't know, we'll see them.
Mike, there are also some questions in the Q&A box that I think might serve well in this portion here. If you have a minute to maybe answer. You want me to do them? Would you like me to handle them now? I can happily do that. Yeah, how about I read them out to you? Sure, I've got them open here as well, Mike. You go ahead. Okay, so how have institutions and states with free community college programs continued to provide STEM scholarship programs to support low-income students? Have there been any adaptations? So Cheryl, that's a great question, and one that we get a lot.
cost of attendance generally goes beyond tuition and fees kind of pretty considerably. To include, even for students who live off campus housing costs. It may include insurance costs. It may include books, technology, at some institutions, computers. STEM will cover costs for any part of the cost of attendance. So if your state has no tuition and fees, you can use STEM support to provide students with stipends for housing, housing and sustenance, things of that type. This is why we ask you to work with your financial aid department. They'll tell you what's in that calculation beyond tuition and fees. And we want cost of attendance to go away for those students. We don't care if tuition and fees are already covered, great. Send us a proposal that will help them cover the rest. And of course, building in cohorts and mentoring and all the other things.
We have a question from Celia. Is there a place for us to find CIP codes that would be funded?
We no longer point the community to SIP codes. That's a great question, Celia. What we ask you to do is take a look at the NSF webpage and determine if there's an alignment between the degrees you'd like to support and programs that the NSF funds, because that's become quite broad. If you're not sure at all, please send me an email. Either I'll answer directly, or if it's a trickier case, I'll get with the other co-leads and we'll get you an answer real quick about what's covered. But it's a lot more than it used to be. With the inclusion of, again, social, behavioral, and economic sciences and other disciplines.
This question is from Stephen. Can we have a high school partner and start students in dual enrollment or pre-approve them if they started after high school?
You can certainly have a high school partner. There's sort of two parts to that, Stephen. And again, y'all are hitting on great questions. These are things that we hear a lot and they're wonderful. So dual enrollment's a little tricky. If the student is considered to be a full student at your institution and they're paying, and all the rights and privileges that they would have, that they are regularly admitted and accepted, it's possible for them to be an STEM scholar. If you're not sure, we can talk more about that. If they are sort of, a lot of dual enrollment programs, though, they're provisionally accepted, they're taking classes for credit, but they're not really considered part-time or full-time students in sort of the fullest sense. We're not permitted, because of the way the legislation is written, to fund students in those circumstances. Again, I'm happy to help you untangle that. The fact that this is backed up by congressional legislation means that we do have to be a little bit careful, but we are here to help. In terms of pre-approving students, yes, absolutely. If you want to recruit out of your pool of, in fact, that's a wonderful pool. We see a lot of institutions. It can be tricky if you've never seen the students before to recruit incoming freshmen, incoming first years. Dual enrollment programs are a great way to do it. And you can say, part of how we're going to identify academic talent is because they've engaged in this way in our dual enrollment program. And that's how they're going to check that box. And then they go through an application process to get considered, perhaps more because hopefully you'll be so oversubscribed that you'll have to, you'll have such a beautifully large pool. But yes, absolutely, pre-selecting is great.
From FISA, can the collaboration in track 3 be with high schools?
Generally, no. But we encourage collaborations with high schools, but the interinstitutional consortia are institutions of higher education. They often involve other partners, industry partners, government partners, not required, and there are plenty that do not. But the educational partnerships are generally higher education.
From Irma, do students have to be U.S. citizens to qualify for STEM scholarships, and what is the citizen requirement?
Yes, because of the legislation, they need to be citizens and permanent residents. Citizens or permanent residents. I can double check. I will, and when Mike starts, I will paste in the chat the exact language. I believe that students who are admitted as refugees are also permitted, but I can double check that. I will paste it into the chat as soon as Mike starts his part.
Yeah, we have 2 questions left, and then we'll switch over. From James, for the PI restriction of an academic administrator who has taught an STEM eligible discipline in the past 2 years, does that 2-year window start from when the project starts or from when the proposal is submitted?
We would generally think of it as when the proposal is submitted. When it's undergoing review, we want to see that they're within that 2-year window. That gives you a little bit more flexibility. That's the slightly more generous reading of the. It's also because it's hard for us to predict exactly when a project will start, because even if you request a specific start date, because of the way the wheels turn at the foundation, it can take a little bit longer for that to happen.
And another question from Faiza. Our institution is a senior CUNY college, but half our students seek associate degrees. Do we qualify?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And we have wonderful programs from every type of institution, and we have wonderful projects at single or multiple institutions. We recently funded a project that's associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees, students at all different levels. Some students starting at the beginning and going all the way through over the life of the award, some students starting at different places. We love associates, bachelor's, master's, doctoral degrees equally in our program.
That's the end of the questions there.
Great. And I will get that text in the chat box ASAP. So Mike, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And from the HSI STEM Hub, was there any key takeaways you wanted to discuss before we moved on?
Well, we have some key points in here to summarize in a general way that these grants are specifically the SSTEM is to provide scholarships for academic talented low-income students with unmet financial need. And that's actually a very important key point for everybody to consider this. And there was another question that actually is related to this, that there probably was, but I think it's more clear now that institutions have to apply for these grants in order to get funding. Then they can actually announce it to their students or their local students out there. So, and then also another key point is that those projects require a cohort-based type of program and also a mentor. Is there anything else, Dr. Vela, to add?
Yeah, thank you, Zelia. That was a very informative presentation, Dr. Ferrara. Some of the key takeaway points that I jotted down were to ensure that you work closely with internal institutional partners, especially with your financial aid office as you're putting together your proposal, to identify and support your students. Think broadly to identify talent and scholars. And I really like the way you talked about how low income is really there's a broad definition to that, or there can be a pretty broad definition to that. And so just thinking about how we define that is really important to the success of the proposal and the institution. Also use data to tell the story of your institution and students, communicate the need, and build on your institution's strengths. Those are the key takeaway points that I got from that. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you. Dr. Ferrara, you already posted information about the question that you had, and thank you for the refugee question.
Yeah, that's direct. It's the page 10 of the solicitation, of the PDF of the solicitation.
Okay.
Now, if you liked what you heard from Mike Ferrara regarding the STEM, something that may be of interest to you, and maybe Mike can post the link to this in the chat as well, but there is currently a Q&A session or an office hour session going on right now with the STEM program. And it goes on for another hour after this meeting ends. And so if you want to pop over to that, Mike should be able to put the link in the chat, where a lot of people will be asking questions similar to the ones you've asked and some other questions you may not have thought of. And that's another really good way to come up to speed on a program like this. So I'd encourage you to check that out if you can. I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. And this is the Advancing Innovation and Impact in Undergraduate STEM Education 2-Year Institutions of Higher Education Program Description 21-7980. That's a lot to say. So we often refer to this as the 2-Year College Program Description, or the 2YCPD. This has a target date of May 2nd, 2022. That is not a due date. A program description is a little bit different from a program solicitation. What Mike was describing there with the STEM program has a solicitation, and there are some specific rules that need to be followed in order for you to successfully submit to that solicitation. This program description operates a little bit differently. So program descriptions don't have a due date, they have a target date. We want things around this time, but they don't have to come in at that time. So for the February 22nd deadline for the STEM, if you were to turn it in on February 23rd, it would not be reviewed. If you were to turn in something for the program description here, if you turned it in on May 3rd, it could still be reviewed. So let's talk a little bit about this. This program description is overseen by some of my colleagues here in the division. Kaylin Owens is the lead, Connie De La Piana, and Corby Horvis assist her at that. And we have some goals with this, and they are to advance innovative and evidence-based practices in undergraduate STEM education at two-year colleges, to address immediate challenges facing STEM education at two-year colleges, to enhance support for research, development, implementation, and assessment to improve STEM education, and to support systemic approaches to advance inclusive and equitable STEM education practices. All of these are done with two-year colleges in mind. One important thing to know about this program description is that you do not need to be a two-year college in order to apply for this. You simply need, the program itself just needs to benefit two-year colleges. So there are some outcomes of interest that we're looking for. And these are including some of these, but they are not limited to these. There are others that can be of interest. Systemic improvements in STEM education, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, and mitigating the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic on two-year colleges. Two-year colleges now across the country are down on the average of 10% with respect to their enrollment. And that's something worth paying attention to. Now, a program description is one of many ways that the National Science Foundation tries to announce funding opportunities. It's a little different from a solicitation. So a program description is a broad, general description of a program or an activity that the National Science Foundation is interested in. So it has rather generic eligibility requirements. As I mentioned before, it is not a solicitation. The rules for applying to one of these is very broad, and we can just sum it up by saying the rules are the PA-PPG. The PA-PPG tells you how to put together a submission. So the PA-PPG is the guiding line behind what will go into a program description. Think of a assignment you might give your students. There are assignments that have very clear-cut goals, and there are assignments that are very open-ended. Think of this as an open-ended assignment. There are lots of ways that you could put something together for the program description. This still uses our merit review criteria that we mentioned previously, the intellectual merit and broader impacts. Those are still the things that we look for with respect to this and any of the other things that come into the National Science Foundation. In order to be eligible for this, any organization described in the categories in the PA-PPG, specifically Part 1.E, is eligible to submit. So two-year colleges, four-year colleges, nonprofit organizations, et cetera, all of those are able to submit. It does not limit the number of proposals that can be submitted by any organization or PI or co-PI. So one institution can submit a number of proposals. A person can be a PI on a number of proposals that come into this. And the program description does not limit or restrict the eligibility of PIs to submit multiple proposals. In many solicitations, there is guidance on the duration and budget of a project. There is not guidance for that in the program description. That means that whatever project you're thinking of can have the scope that it needs to be successful, and you can write the budget for it that it needs to be successful. What we ask is that both the duration and the budget are in scale with what you're proposing to do. So this is decided by the project team. And what we would ask you to do is follow the PA-PPG guidelines for what is allowable. So just because there are no real guidelines on how much budget can be put into a program like this, there are still guidelines on what sort of things can be used, that budget can be used for. So for example, building new buildings is something that that budget cannot be used for. That is not what the PA-PPG allows for. So these proposals are evaluated. And so a lot of the strategies that Mike talked about with the STEM are strategies you still want to think about with respect to submitting to the program description. They should be clear, and they should have a specific evaluation plan. They should speak to measurable goals and objectives, and they should incorporate a clear mechanism to assess the success of the project. If you choose to have an advisory board, it is not required, but it is something that many projects consider to be very useful. It can be very appropriate. And if you are looking for funds for an advisory board, we ask that you give the nature and function of that board, and that identify individuals and include letters of commitment if possible. And those letters of commitments can be submitted as supplemental documents. And the PAPPG is actually giving you some fairly specific guidelines on what can go into those letters of collaboration. Please note that letters of support are not allowed. And the PAPPG Act describes what a letter of support is and why that is not allowed. The facilities, equipment, and other resources document that often comes with many of our proposals can be used to expand upon the commitments or activities for letter writers. So what that means is that if there's someone working at the institution that has a role that is in line with what the proposed activities will be, that person can appear in the facilities and equipment and other resources document, as well as some of their time that would be used to work on this. So the program description, what that allows you to do is think about your institution as a two-year college or as something that serves a two-year college, and what sort of project it's trying to, what sort of thing it's trying to do to alleviate a problem faced by students at two-year colleges or in two-year colleges as they make transfers, or in any other aspect of the two-year college existence. So if there is something that you have in mind there, this is something you can write a proposal for. The things that's different about the program description compared to solicitations is it doesn't give specific guidelines on what has to be in there, the duration or its budget. Those are left up to the imagination of the proposer. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have about this or anything else Mike talked about, but maybe before we answer questions, if there are any key takeaways that the HSI Resource Hub people would like to talk about?
I think the most important thing that you mentioned that we believe that has to be considered is that projects will be expected to build on prior fundamental and or applied research in STEM education. And that's something that it is important for people to think about it and to build on that. Is there anything else, Dr. Vela?
Thank you, Dana. Yes, definitely. I think what I keep seeing coming up throughout the entire presentation is the PAPPG is the guideline, reference back to that as you're putting together your proposal. But I also see a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion being mentioned through these programs. And so the effort and the intention, it seems like, of these programs is to bring equity and inclusion into STEM spaces and to bring diverse students into a pipeline that truly it's helping them succeed in STEM. So I'm really excited about this latest project description that you just spoke about. It seems like a really incredible, it could render some really incredible results. So thank you.
Thank you. We're really excited about it as well. And one of the cool things about an open-ended assignment like this is some really interesting things can come back, things that can actually make the National Science Foundation think more broadly about what it would like to do with respect to two-year colleges.
Is there anything from the speaker's side? Do you have something to add? Is there anything else to discuss?
The only thing I'd throw out there is just, again, to go back to the HSI website and take another look at the solicitation. A good reminder that if you were working on a proposal that you were planning on turning in February of 2022, that date has been pushed back into March 28th for those track 3s. And we're accepting track 1 and track 2 for the HSI solicitation. So go back and take a look at that and see if that's something you may be able to work on for this time around.
Otherwise, don't be afraid to look us up. Don't be afraid to reach out. We get a lot of email. We may be a little bit slower than we would hope to be at times, but we will get back to you. So if you write, don't ever be afraid to poke, follow up, but we will answer your questions. We promise.
Thank you. Well, we are certain that many of our viewers will contact you today and to either finalize their proposals or to start writing a new proposal. And we really appreciate your insightful presentations, your time, and your willingness to share your experience with us this afternoon. And I really want to remind the participants as you leave, please answer the survey that it is extremely important for us. The link to the survey was actually posted by Dr. Margie Vela and also by Miss Miriam. Please answer the survey as you leave. It's not gonna take you that long to answer the survey. We really appreciate it. Anything else to add?
Thank you for having us. This was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We hope to see you soon again. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend,
Bye.
everybody.